We will now begin the session, Restoring Balance Together, Learning and Leading in India's Landscape Restoration Efforts. So this session brings together leaders who have shaped landscape restoration across India through community partnerships, governance innovations, agroecological models, digital transformation, and local institutional strengthening. At its core, this session is about shared leadership. So restoration succeeds when science, community knowledge, institutions, and market systems come together. And today we'll explore how those collaborative models are being built, tested, and scaled. It is now, before we begin that, I would like to welcome Nirja on stage. So yesterday, as you all know, the minister from Jharkhand couldn't be with us. Her flight got delayed, but she has a message for us. So I'll request Nirja to please come on the dais, and we'll play that small message followed by the panel discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome back after lunch. So the Honorable Minister of Rural Development and Panchayati Raj, Government of Jharkhand, Srimati Deepika Pandey Singh ji, unfortunately could not join us in person because her flight got delayed, but she has sent us a digital address which we would like to play for you. But before that, I would like to set some context on the restoration work that has happened in Jharkhand under her leadership. So this scheme is called Birsa Harit Gram Yojana, which the government of Jharkhand spearheaded in collaboration with Transform Rural India. And this is a bold step to turn Narega from a source of just a short-term wage employment to a productive asset creation and ownership of those assets by the communities, especially women. So, those assets are no longer just water bodies or, NRM structures, but high-density fruit orchards and timber plantations at scale across the landscapes of Jharkhand. And what has made this a success are three pillars. The first pillar is strong local supply ecosystem, where the SSGs run nursery enterprises and they supply high quality saplings to the government and to farmers. The second is water security. So when, early stage water supply is essential for orchards to mature. So using Narega, that was ensured. And the third pillar is linking these smallholder farmers to global carbon markets. So this has helped create green jobs, restore landscapes, put the power of green economy directly into the hands of Jharkhand's 1.6 lakh farmers who are cultivating orchards across 1.4 lakh acres of land, creating a bank account for their future generation, ensuring income security, nutrition, and resilience to climate change. So without taking further time on this, I would request the team to play the video and the message that Deepika ji has shared for us today.
जोहार, नमस्कार। मनरेगा के तहत बिरसा हरित ग्राम योजना झारखंड में व्यापक बदलाव ला रहा है और ख़ास करके हमारे एसएचजी के बहनों के जीवन में हमारे अनुपजाऊ जो ज़मीन पड़े हुए थे, आज उसमें बागवानी करके फल उगाए जा रहे हैं और हमारी बहनों ने इससे न सिर्फ अपने परिवार को बल्कि अपने आसपास के भी परिवारों को रोज़गार देने का काम किया है, उनके जीवन में सुधार लाने का काम किया है। 2016-17 में इसको पायलट किया गया और कोविड में हो रही परेशानियों को देखने के बाद जब झारखंड के लोग वापस झारखंड में आ रहे थे, उन्हें रोज़गार से जोड़ने के लिए 2020-21 में इसे व्यापक तौर पर बढ़ाया गया। आज इसमें जो लोग जुड़े हुए हैं, न सिर्फ अपने लिए फलों का वृक्ष लगा पा रहे हैं, बल्कि अपने आसपास रहने वाले लोगों को भी रोज़गार दे पा रहे हैं। इस योजना की खूबसूरती यह है कि इसमें 73% जो है वो वेजेस है। वेजेस से लोगों के आसपास जो ग्रामीण इलाके में लोग काम और रोज़गार ढूंढते हैं, उन्हें सशक्तिकरण हो रहा है। एक बड़ा बदलाव मनरेगा के माध्यम से आज झारखंड में हो पाया है। करीब 2 करोड़ फलों के वृक्ष और 70 लाख जो टिम्बर प्लांट्स हैं उनको लगाया गया है। आज हम कह सकते हैं कि जितनी हमारी आबादी है उसके आसपास हम लोगों ने वृक्ष लगाने का काम किया है। यह सिर्फ लोगों के अर्थव्यवस्था को सशक्त नहीं कर रहा, बल्कि हमारे पर्यावरण पर भी इसका बहुत बड़ा व्यापक प्रभाव है। और ये आने वाले सालों में सिर्फ हमारे राज्य के लिए ही नहीं, बल्कि इस पूरे देश के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा एग्जाम्पल होगा। मैं आप लोगों के बीच आकर के इस कार्यक्रम में सम्मिलित होना चाहती थी, आप लोगों से सहयोग लेना चाहती थी, और आज इसे पूरे राज्य में सशक्त तरीके से चलाने के लिए आप लोगों का भी बहुत बड़ा सहयोग इसमें हो सकता है। मैं आप लोगों को धन्यवाद करना चाहती हूँ, और मुझे पूरी उम्मीद है कि हम लोग जल्द कहीं किसी कार्यक्रम में फिर मिलेंगे। धन्यवाद। जोहार, नमस्कार।
Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Siddharth to the stage.
Thank you so much, Neerja. We'll now begin the panel discussion post-lunch. I would be introducing the moderator and our esteemed panelists. First, I would like to introduce Ms. Jaskiran Waring. She's the program head for restoration at WRI India. She brings over a decade of experience in sustainable agriculture and multi-stakeholder initiatives. Jaskiran has managed public-private partnerships and led teams at IDH, the Organic Cotton Accelerator, and the World Economic Forum. Our panelists for this session are, I would first like to introduce Arjun Singh. He's the lead for Ecological Restoration Alliance. Arjun is a designer by training and has spent past 3 years building the ERA Alliance in India. And it's a pan-India community of practice advancing ecological restoration as a movement. He helped decentralize the alliance and strengthen institutional collaboration, and now applies a systems approach to identify challenges and streamline efforts across the network. Our next panelist is Minhaj Ameen from the Agroecological Fund. Minhaj has a background in mechanical engineering and an MBA from Manchester Business School, and he works to drive collaborative systems level change for sustainable food systems. Since 2019, Minhaj has advanced agroecological based solutions while helping establish the National Coalition for Natural Farming and the Bharat Agroecology Fund. Our next panelist is Kundan Burnwal. He is a climate change mitigation policy professional with 15 years of experience. He currently works as senior advisor at GIZ India, leading initiatives on carbon markets, climate change mitigation, and forestry. He is also the speaker at the Environment Working Group under TUVA's sector network, and has authored the first internationally approved REDD Plus methodology for South Asia. Our last panelist for this session is Prashant Mehra. He's the CEO and co-founder of Platform Commons, and he's a recognized thought leader with more than 30 years of experience and a strong track record in building digital public goods for sectors such as agriculture, education, healthcare, and civic engagement. An IIT Kharagpur alumnus, he leads the Commons platform, which supports community-focused digital solutions. His current work is centered around strengthening smallholder agriculture, climate resilient practices, and community-owned supply chains, along with community-driven innovation. So, as you can see, we have a very diverse set of panelists, and these panelists bring a very different kind of experience, and we are going to benefit from that today. But all of them are united by a shared commitment of balancing ecological, social, and economic goals for landscape restoration. So, may I request the moderator and the panelists to please come on the dais. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Jaskiran. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you here. Our session today is really framed around a simple and powerful idea. We've been talking about financing a lot, and I actually started yesterday talking a lot about investments and financing, but actually one of the things that really drives our sector is collaborations. So what we're looking for in this session today is really talking about the balance between ecology and livelihoods, traditional knowledge and scientific evidence, between community leadership and institutional support, and finally between long-term systems and an immediate need at the grassroots level. So we've tried to bring that to our session today with our esteemed guests and speakers. I say guests, but from what I understand, and forgive me, I've only been at WRI India for the last 3 months, but these have been our partners for quite a while, or at least in the network of work that we've been doing and supporting us through it. So across India, what we've been seeing as WRI India, and now I can co-opt that and talk about it like it's my own baby, but actually I have a wonderful team that supports that. We've been seeing inspiring examples also in the restoration exhibition at the back and over the course of the last couple of days, that from community-led restoration and agroecology, we've also seen examples in innovation. I think we spoke about earlier today in the panel that we had right in the beginning. Also governance, financing, digital systems, as you've seen already, the address from Honorable Minister Pandey, talking a lot about the kind of schemes that are already ongoing in Jharkhand and the support that she's requested to actually scale those schemes up nationally. So I'm really delighted to be able to dive into this conversation, and without spending more time on the introduction, let me go to you first, Arjun. I know that you work very deeply on ecologically sound restoration models, so they have to make sense for everybody involved. But from your experience, how can technical restoration approaches be better integrated with social and economic needs? And while you're answering that, maybe you want to throw in something around sustained community engagement in your work.
So thank you for that, Jaskiran, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to kind of be talking about the work that the Alliance does. So just to start with, I think this question of how do we integrate social and economic needs with technical restoration, I think that question should be flipped. I think it should be, how do we, so the question really should be, is not how are we going to address these needs through restoration, but how are we going to adapt our needs along with restoration and recovery of native biodiversity or ecological restoration. I think that should be the question we should be focusing on, because it's about time. We've seen a lot of different kind of models coming up, and we're all trying multiple things, but I think we need to start identifying these new ways and pathways where we can find new social and economic needs from native biodiversity. Right? And we are seeing sparks of this. Of course, the exhibition at the back, I'll go back to that a little bit more in detail, but I'll share an example because I sometimes feel these are much easier to kind of relate with. So there's one of these projects that are there on, that have been part of our partner network. It's by Timbuktu Collective, and they have this project called Kalpavali, which is a community conserved area. And now this community conserved area, what is really fantastic about it is that it's a 4,000 acre community conserved area, which is managed by the villages and the people of the, which is managed by the community around that, right? And they have this system where there is only there is a limited amount of grazing allowed. You can collect NTFPs from there. Eventually the sales of these NTFPs go back to the village to kind of help in infrastructure or other needs that the village might have. The commons themselves become because it's a grazing land, it'll increase productivity of the livestock. That 4,000 acre becomes a way to recharge irrigation tanks, which further supplies, which allows to irrigate 1,500 acres of agricultural land around. Right? Now, I think if you look at something like that, you're already seeing that restoration is adding already a lot more. And these are the kind of ways that we can think about this. But another way that you can see is what we're seeing behind there in the work of the restoration champions. There are so many new models of creating income through different kind of biodiverse solutions. And I think I will emphasize on that word biodiverse, because we can't rely on just one kind of a product to sustain or provide income. Because then we again go into monoculture. You can have a monoculture of maua, you can have a monoculture of bamboo, you can do all of that. But how do we look at finding solutions through biodiversity, right? And I think that is an interesting angle to approach. And of course, now the next question will be, there is already enough market, then why is it not taking off? And I think then the question that we should go back to is, how do we make sure that we can celebrate local? How do we make sure that we actually celebrate our biodiversity around us in all aspects, right? And that is something that is going to help, again, spur this direction of trying to find more economic solutions. It meets, the minute you celebrate local, you meet the social need of belonging to a place, having pride in that landscape for the things that you find around. And those are the kind of questions that I would say we should be thinking about and answering as well.
Yeah, and I really think that growing locally, sourcing locally, that's something we've been discussing for a while now, and I think it's taking off, but it's taken some time, and I hope that it continues with that snowball momentum. Minhaj, to you actually the question is around supporting models and also financing. So given that you've supported these nationwide, what solutions have most effectively balanced the social with the ecological, with the economic? I know it's tall order, but in your experience, how has that come together? And how have you seen financing models come up and support that?
Thank you, Jaspreet. First is, I would like to just Kiran, sorry, my bad. Just talk about the work that we do, and then come to your question. I wear two hats, and I will throw in one more word here, which is maybe not known to everyone, agroecology. Basically, I represent a global philanthropic fund called Agroecology Fund. Agroecology here means any kind of agriculture practice or practices that take us away from the use of synthetic chemicals as inputs. Yeah? So organic agriculture, biodynamic agriculture are all sister movements, natural farming that we support. And Bharat Agroecology Fund is a regional fund of that global fund. And for the last 4 years, we have funded around 60 organizations. Our fund is very unique. So you heard in the morning about lock frames, outcome-based funding, and so on. Basically, what we do is we collect money from different philanthropies, larger philanthropies. We aggregate it, and we provide funding which is entirely trust-based. So no lock frame is required. We trust the partner to do the right thing. And we also believe that deciding who should get funding and how much, we are not the right people. So we build an external independent advisory board, and in India we have 9 such members. They decide how the money is allocated and disbursed. So through this work, and Agroecology Fund has been active in India for a much longer period. What we have learned is, if you empower the local communities, if you trust their wisdom and their knowledge, amazing outcomes are possible. Amazing innovations are possible. And over the last so many years, we have seen innovations in almost all aspects of agriculture, be it fisheries, be it seed systems, be it watershed management, on-farm practices, and so on, even in enabling local markets. So I will come to my second hat, which is called the Consortium for Agroecological Transformations. So what we realized while supporting these local communities, collectives, smaller CSOs, is they can do so much. and they can go so far. But if you really want to transform a community, it requires many more stakeholders to come together and work with each other. So the consortium is aiming to bring about large-scale transformation in the country, and that transformation is based on agroecological principles, 13 principles which talk about equity, circularity, better diets for local communities, enabling local wisdom to come forth, and so on. We realized that we have to bring in actors who are funders, who are research institutions, market players, to all come together, work with the community to make this transition happen. So this consortium, which is called CAT, is currently working in 11 very diverse landscapes across the country with the local partners and the local communities to develop holistic, transformative solutions and plans. And we hope to then bring in funding from different sources. So what we have learned, to answer your question, is there is innovations happening. There are immense challenges, but the solutions will come by bringing all of these stakeholders together. And now, with regards to funding, we do trust-based funding. We trust the organizations and the local communities to do what they have to do. But then this has to be complemented with different types of funding. So philanthropy, larger philanthropies will have to come in with maybe more regulated interventions, but to then support the communities to take whatever innovations are happening, whatever they are doing already, to take further. Then comes CSR money. And CSR money is quite significant, but comes with even more restrictions. But they can then come in to help with activities which are measurable and tangible. And then finally, the most important thing is to unlock the largest fund that is available for this transformation, which is government money. And all of us have to work together to see how that can be unlocked. Now, the most important thing in financing this transformation is to ensure to use the right type of funding for the right type of activity. If you use philanthropic money where the government money is more appropriate, funds will not be enough. So our learning is, how do we blend all of these different types of finances to come together with the local community at the center, the local transformation at the center of this work, and make sure that all the money works together to make it happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Min. I think talking about trust-based funding, talking about innovations, talking about collaborations, bringing that diverse stakeholder viewpoint to the table is yeah, it's music to all our ears. And the thing is, it's almost like it was planned, but Kundan is going next, and he's actually going to talk about government systems and community institutions, and also, you know, what sort of innovations have we seen that are essential for achieving this sort of balanced restoration outcomes.
Thanks, Jaskiran. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. And I'll begin with a bit of a background about a project that GIZ is implementing. The project is called Restore, Conserve and Protect Forest and Tree Cover for NDC implementation in India. And that's a bit of a mouthful, right? So we have a very nice acronym to it, which is a recap for NDC. And this is a project which is financed by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment through its ICI initiative, that's the International Climate Initiative. And this is a seven-year project ending in 2029. And the project is being implemented across 4 regions in India. And I say regions, not states, because it's being implemented in Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Uttarakhand, and the Delhi NCR, which is a region. And the project is a large consortium project which is being led by GIZ, but implemented jointly with IUCN India, TERI, ICFRE, that's the Indian Council for Forestry Research and Education, Forest Survey of India, and ECMOD, that's also quite a lot, right? So, yeah, but every institution has a different role in the project, and there are 5 outcomes that we want to achieve, and each of the consortium partner is responsible for achieving one of this. So the project primarily promotes the concept of forest landscape restoration in the regions that I just mentioned. And now coming to your question, innovation. And I like that word a lot, but I think it is also important that one has to understand what innovation are we talking about. Innovation in restoration, I can definitely say, is not glamorous, no? And it takes us back to what we constantly profess, that both academically and even theoretically, that it requires institutions with greater mandate and strength. And this could be in terms of strengthening with legal mandates, or even identifying opportunities for addressing multiple facets of restoration, right? So, and balanced restoration outcomes, in my opinion, can be achieved or attempted to achieve with, when you address a few facets of governance and institutions, and primarily looking at clarity of role and responsibilities across sectors. And across sectors is important because, as we all heard, it's agriculture, forest, and so on and so forth. We can name almost every sector, yeah. The other thing is empowering local communities with real authority, yeah, and more finance. And the third one is hardwiring multi-stakeholder adaptive decision-making, which is not top-down only, but also bottom-up, right? So given this background, I think I'll cite a few examples from what we've been doing in recap for NDC project. So one important element we realized early in the project was that let's look at a forum or a platform where landscape-level conversations should happen. And when I say platform, I am not meaning a platform like this, but where decisions will be made, right? So will it be district level, landscape level, and ideally all the other line departments should be there to jointly plan, implement, and even monitor. And I think we need to do away with this concept of fragmented decision-making, which is scheme-wise, no? Every department is running helter-skelter to deliver on their schemes. How can we make them understand that, you guys can work together? It is evolving. It is happening as we speak, but that is something that we would definitely have to work on. And and it's no rocket science, but we learned and realized that the institution of the district magistrate offers that opportunity. And the thing is that they have what is called an advisory committee, which is also at times called convergence committees, which has representation from various line departments, and they have the wherewithal in terms of planning, implementing, and also allocating resources for a restoration measure or an approach. And we also realize that in these convergence committees, the forest department is represented by the DFOs or the Deputy Conservator of Forests, and they can put in the proposals that we are developing, which we are calling restoration plans. In common parlance, it's the DPRs, which we also should be using terms which resonates with the people that we are speaking to, right? So the idea was that can we bring the conversation of restoration on this platform and make them ensure that they plan, implement, and monitor the implementation. So monitor the implementation. Yeah, so that was one. Another thing that we realized in recap was that we could possibly look at, polycentric multi-level structures. And when I say polycentric multi-level structures, I mean, can we look at steering committees at the state level, which has the responsibility of asking these departments to come together. So we in Recap for NDC set up state steering committees, which was which is chaired by the Principal Secretary Environment Forest or the Additional Chief Secretary, who has the convening power of bringing all these departments together and telling, and then maybe, approving the restoration plans and making it available to these departments and directing them to possibly finance elements. And as you rightly said, we always keep talking about various kinds of financing, but when we spoke to the partner institutions in the state, and I mean the government, they have the money. Yeah, they just don't know how to possibly take it, use it in such cases. So the other thing was strengthening. We have an amazing participatory institutional network in the country, right? So strengthening them. And when I talk about participatory institutional networks, I mean joint forest management committees, the one panchayats, the eco-development boards, panchayati raj institutions, all of them. And we need to strengthen them by, revising their bylaws, which exists, possibly also revising the gender quota that they have in their, mix. Also looking at clarifying roles and responsibilities in terms of planning, implementing, and monitoring the FLR measures that we eventually want to implement. Yeah. Last point before I give it back to you. I know I'm taking a little more time. You've already covered finance, so I will not touch that. But we realize data is a problem. And problem as in like it is scarce, and whatever is available is also not very palatable, if I may say so. Yeah? And so what we are doing right now is we are coming up with open source dashboards to begin with 2 state governments, Uttarakhand and Gujarat, where we will be working on developing dashboards where data will be fed from the field and can be monitored at the headquarter level in the forest department. But that will only be for the forest department, right? Like this has to happen across all the other sectors as well. And I can say more, but maybe later. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Actually, there's a lot to unpack in there. And, my question that's sort of rattling around in my head right now, Kundan, is where are you with varying degrees of success, I'm sure, in your journey to get this to a point where it's actually working and will continue working in the long term? I don't know if you want to answer that or if I should move to Prashant, because his viewpoint is going to be
I wanted to save this statement for the end, but I will just say it. I think one important aspect is that there needs to be a willingness to move and embrace new and emerging ways of working, which might break a lot of long-standing dogmas that exists. And that's really challenging. And trust me, as a bilateral cooperation, we try to innovate into the existing scheme of things, not reinvent the wheel and say, okay, you know what, you should do it this way. Or what we try to do is, okay, you are doing this, you could possibly do it better, possibly. Do it better if you tweak a few things here and there. But is there acceptance for that? Are they ready to change their long-standing dogmas?
A question to be answered. But Prashant, that's not the question we're going to ask you. But what we are going to bring to you is, Kundan was talking about data and the importance of it. And I know you do a lot of work at Platform Commons to create that sort of data platform that can bring communities to work together better. So the question to you really is, how can digital tools bring not just smallholder farmers, but local communities, institutions, markets, come together for restoration purposes?
Thank you. So I think the one-word response to what you asked, Jaskiran, would be interoperability. Now, what I mean by interoperability, let me share some examples. So, all of you would have done bank transfers. So you go to bank one, you create an RTGS, NEFT transfer, money goes magically in few seconds to the other bank. Now that's because every bank which is out there has agreed on a standard format, a standard mechanism for doing money transfer from one to another. I'm sure everybody uses UPI. Life of UPI, building UPI actually was so easy because it was just another layer on top of an infrastructure that already existed in the sector. The ability to move money in a standard mechanism from one bank to another existed, and therefore you build UPI on top of it saying scan a QR code and now do the transfer. Take another example, manufacturing industry or automotive. Nuts, bolts, screws, steering column, tires, the coupling of different components in a car, all standardized. You can go, you'll find engineering standards for all of that. The reason I'm giving you these examples is because for any industry to mature, you need standardization of many things. One of our biggest drawbacks in the dev sector, we are a sector, like automotive sector and pharma and everything, we are a sector. Imagine if every hospital had its own mechanism to grade your blood test. Doesn't, right? At the whole level, if you have your cholesterol is something or your CBC is something, every doctor, every hospital understands it to mean the same. It's impossible to work with each other if we are not speaking the same language. Now coming to us, right? So there is beneficiary data. Beneficiary had needs. Beneficiary has skills. Beneficiary will have, so you will look at a village profile. It has natural resources. It has infrastructure. It has gaps. It has local demand. It has import. It has export from the village. You do a PRA. It comes with its outcomes. But give me one example when the PRA output from one NGO another NGO can make sense out of it. It can't. Least of it, forget they can't even make out by reading it, they'll say, no, we work differently. We are talking about a scenario where technically data can flow from one NGO to the other. And it means the same to us. I think that is the first step for us to agree that we can operate as a sector. A sector is built on the back of sectoral standards. You push the envelope a little further from data standards to intervention, interoperability of intervention. So you are working with goat farmers in Mayurbhanj. And you do some stuff and you come out with some plans to work with, and you say, this is how, a herd of 4 goats will now grow and this is how you will sell and so on and so forth. So when I started working with goat farmers in Mayurbhanj, I realized there is a process. Depending on what the black Bengal goat's life cycle is, when does it reach reproduction age, what is the ratio of the litter that is born, at what age do you sell the male goat, what age do you sell the female goat, is all well scripted for you to actually build a herd. It is not random. I'm saying this is useful knowledge. So why can't this be standardized in terms of cash flow, feed needed, the steps you will do month 1, month 2, month 3? That is an example of interoperability of interventions. And if I am in the skill training business, can I not pull some data from your NGO database and say I need 3 vaccinators because there are 3,000 goats in this particular block and therefore vaccination services are needed, and therefore I can plan my skilling to only train 3 vaccinators and not 30. So the second point therefore is interoperability of interventions. And it goes a long way because each one of us are actually, each one of our organizations only has the ability to do a small part of that intervention. So unless we can divide work amongst each other, and we are seeing amazing results. We are working with about 40 FPOs, where 4 NGOs have come together in Anantapur region, Andhra, where they are saying, hey, collectively we work with 60 FTOs, but you are good at market linkage. So irrespective of whose beneficiary it is, NGOs sometimes tend to say, my FPO, my beneficiary. So they said, NGO 1, Vritti, you do all the market linkage for all the 60 FPOs. And me, I will do the training and handholding for all of them. And a third person said, no, I have worked with finance, so I'm going to help do finance access to all the 60. Because you are distributing, right? So if you look at yourself as a service provider to the community, you can do this distribution if you standardize the intervention. So broadly, these two things, there's a lot more to say. I'm also looking at the clock in terms of interoperability. But the call to action is if leaders in this room can come together and say, hey, I want to lay down some standards so that we can start talking of ourselves as a development sector. And sector has standards. Standard intervention, standardized format of intervention model. Standardized data structures to interchange with each other. Then you have built the backbone to be able to collaborate. What you need as a sector, what all of us need, is some sort of a cartelization, because you are competing with some other forces. So we have to come together and kind of make our own rules. So I'll take a pause now. And rest of the conversation, I'll retain the theme with more examples of how you collaborate and come together. But the one word for takeaway I'd leave with you is interoperability of data, of interventions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Prashant. And also about, the example that you picked with 4 NGOs doing what they're good at and, making that a sort of combined common way of working in those FPOs. I think that's really interesting. So actually, I'm already seeing that, we have quite a bit coming out in terms of shared leadership, systems thinking, interoperability, innovations, deep sense of community partnership when we start building any intervention and start implementing it. I think we have always looked at collaborations as a way to scale. Even in the SDGs, you have partnerships for all, because that's essentially what we think will help scale. But within those collaborations, let's now look a little bit at the enablers that you also need to help reach restoration at scale. So actually, Arjun, coming back to you, I think one of the common misconceptions or mistakes was the one where you flipped whether or not technical approaches need to look at society and societal needs. But are there any others, any other misconceptions or mistakes that are common in restoration practice? And how can, to Prashant's point, how can knowledge sharing and standards help address them?
Sure. Thank you for that. I think whenever we talk about misconceptions and kind of mistakes that we can think about, I think one biggest one that we have as a misconception is that we are trying to restore 300 years of ecological damage in 30 years or less. It's not, that is the scale of damage that has been done. And we assume that we can actually restore so quickly. And because we assume that we can restore so quickly, we are trying to run with solutions that promise immediate scale without actually looking at the long term, without actually monitoring it in the long term. Right? So we say, okay, you know what, 5 lakh trees planted in, Jaisalmer. And suddenly you're planting 5 lakh trees in Jaisalmer, where it's an arid ecology, it is part of the Thar Desert ecoregion, and how is it going to survive? But it's celebrated, right? So when do we really celebrate successes? I think that is something we have to think about. how do we scale is another interesting question in this. So one part of misconception is this, right? That we are rushing towards trying to fix 300 years of ecological damage in 30 years. Right? Second part is, of course, that when we are looking at India in itself, we follow this approach called the eco-region approach. And the idea is that if you look at India from an ecological standpoint and divide it according to ecological zones, you would have about 51 ecoregions, so which are distinct ecologies. Of course, you will have the same trees in some places and so on, but the important part is that they are distinct communities or densities are different, and the way it inhabits a landscape, that would be different. Right? So when we're thinking about restoration, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We need more place-based interventions. We need to have people coming together for that particular place and restoring it from there. And that's where what Prashant had talked about, knowledge sharing, and having this kind of, if I would take that word interoperability and say it should be that we should have a lot more knowledge sharing within nonprofits or within people working on ground, saying that, and this is something that we are trying at the Alliance, this idea of how do you germinate different trees in different locations, or how do you germinate different plants in different locations. So in case you have that, then you can actually take that up. You can go to, we have this thing called the Seed Germination Database, which is a compilation of about 1,200 entries on different germination techniques for about 500 species or so. But the idea was that it was contributed by over 15 to 20 different organizations who have started their own nurseries. Right? So they have contributed to that so that the next person somewhere down the line can actually pick that data up and start their own nursery in that landscape. Because one of the main problems that we have is good planting material that are suited to that ecoregion. Right? So that's one example of how we're thinking about knowledge sharing. Another thing that we have to think about, especially when we go about we talked about restoration and this rush to kind of, go and plant, but what exactly is restoration is still fairly misunderstood. We feel that tree planting drive is restoration. We feel that trees on a grassland is restoration. That's not it, right? So I think we need to kind of build that capacity across different partners and institutions in different landscapes to take up that work. I'm not saying that one organization should go and do everything everywhere, because that's impossible. We need more collaborative solutions, right? And we need to kind of share amongst ourselves. So that's another aspect that we are trying to enable through the Alliance. And that's part of our work as well, is on that. Like, how do we come together? So we are an informal alliance. I didn't probably share that earlier. The way we work is that we have multiple institutional partners who are also taking on different aspects of the work. So we are not, so for example, I work with NCF, but my role is to kind of work on this, on the alliance, as trying to see what's happening across different verticals, but we have somebody else anchored at Keystone Foundation looking at how do you work or enable indigenous people and local communities to take up restoration. Similarly, you have someone working, we have A-Tree coming in together, coming in and helping us with policy. Now again, we don't have to build that skill set, but like what was pointed out there, you can bring in different institutional strengths together to come in and move this as a sector. And I think that is really important. So these are some of those aspects that I would say is interesting. And then just one last thing that I'd add is in terms of standards. I think one thing that we have to think about, and this goes back to monitoring and measuring, going back to monitoring again, is how do we incorporate like more global standards in some sense? So we have the Global Biodiversity Standard, which is an interesting one. It is not really, it does not just say that this is only going to be restoration, but it gives a grade based on what is the potential of that landscape, how much have you achieved, and it's very much based on even SER's wheel of restoration. Right? So it's a combination of different ways of looking at a landscape and assessing it. So I think that could be another way, that can we come up with common standards that we would like to incorporate, and then use that as a way of measuring and monitoring the kind of work that has happened.
Thank you. I think what you mentioned about, reversing 300 years of ecological damage in a matter of a few years, that really resonates with me. And I think Lakshmi from the previous panel was also talking about, what keeps her up at night is that the world is becoming more impatient. But I completely get that. It's like me and my trainer in exercise. I can't be expected to love exercise in a few years, It's going to take time. So just moving on to you then, Minhaj. I think another thing that Arjun was talking about is the definition of restoration. And when you started, you were like, I'm going to talk about agroecology. And there are a lot of terms out there and a lot of differences in how people perceive what restoration is, what it isn't. But on the whole, and I remember having these debates about regenerative agriculture as well, and we get so caught up in a lot of these definitions that I'm thinking from your perspective, when you're coming at this, what are the shifts that are needed, not just in, let's say, finance, public finance, CSR, philanthropy, which is the question that I have for you, but also in terms of the way that we view all of these different ways of restoring the land that we all need to be working on. I've also heard, for example, water is not a part, when we don't focus enough on water. But when we're talking about landscapes, you're talking about everything, right? Or is that not correct? So I'm going to hand that question over to you.
Thank you, Jaskiran. I think what's interesting is the evolution, and I think Prashant touched upon it, of the civil society ecosystem thus far. And if you look at how we get funding, it was based on how is mine different from yours, right? And if you look at the amount of transition on land in India today, the land that is under transition with any form of alternative agriculture practices, I'm looking at agriculture as a landscape here, be it regenerative, organic, whatever, is 1.7% of the land. It's hardly anything out of 140 million hectares under cultivation. And what that does is, within that, because our premise is how was my approach different from yours, we have 1 million different approaches competing with each other to get, some funding. Now, I think we have to transition to the next level of evolution. Yeah? The industry has to mature and consolidate, create standards of what it means for the land to transform, and so on. And I see that many of us will have to play this role of systems orchestrators. And I'll build on Prashant's example. I think one of the reasons why smartphones are so popular today is because of Android. And Android is a collaboration of 184 odd companies. And some of them are big names. They all agreed to create a common operating system, not merge, they still compete. Yeah? But the competition is on hardware or different types of apps and so on. We need to get to that stage now. There is enough work to be done. We need more and more people joining this ecosystem to help with the transition. So collaborate on creating common standards, even for, if you look at government or donors, I will go in and say to the government, I have this approach, and they'll ask me, how many farmers are you working with? I'll say 1,000 farmers. And for a district collector even, 1,000 farmers are neither here nor there. That doesn't bring about change. Now imagine a scenario where we create common standards or common approaches, which is what we are advocating for under CAT. If all of us go and talk the same language, there is more likelihood that the district administration, the state administration will say, well, this is possible. There are a few million farmers now who are under these organizations who are moving in similar directions instead of confusing people. So this is one very important, I think we are hearing from other panelists also, step that we need to take. This is an inflection point in our journey for this transition. in 30 years. With regards to funding, I think what we'll have to look at is right now, most of the funding, Agroecology Fund is very different from most funders, and many funders are moving in that direction. But we need more funders to realize that the work we are trying to do is not, cannot happen in 2, 3, 4 years. This is a long-term process. It involves, behavior change. It involves dealing with changing climate, changing market conditions. So if I'm looking at shift in funding, I would say move away from this, funding which is based on very short durations to longer periods and more trust-based, flexible funding, because environment is changing all the time. The second thing that I would like to focus on is how do we measure success? And right now, many funders are focusing on outputs. How many trainings have you done? How many meals have you served? Because they are easy to measure. To move away from that to outcome-based. And I think if you look around in the room and many people in in our sector, the ultimate aim that we all have is well-being of the community, well-being of the ecosystem. That's the outcome we are looking for. So how do we align our work so that all of us, and if you keep that as your end goal, it's more easy to collaborate, because watershed work is connected to seed systems work is connected to on-farm transition, and so on. So change the metric from outputs to outcomes. And finally, I know that most funders and most of us work on one specific area. How do we shift back a little bit and start to look at systems level change? Of course you have to be a specialist, an expert in one area, but look at a larger transition, look at systems level transition, which will engender spontaneous collaborations, because that's the ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Minhaj. I can almost feel Kundan resonate sitting over there with everything that you've just said, also on the systems level change. And actually, that was going to be my question to him. What sort of systems level changes do we need to see as enablers? But Kundan, I'm going to also add in there, I think you spoke a lot about the systems level change, starting ground up, sort of working with district magistrates, speaking the same language, these steering committees at state level. I'm also wondering, from the point of view of, a lot of this talks about the work that we are doing for communities. How are you including them in the systems level change as well?
Okay. First of all, I would like to talk a little about landscape. I think people don't understand that term. People have to understand that we are talking about a larger piece of land which has mosaic land uses. When we say forest landscape restoration, we don't only mean forest areas. It's a landscape which has forests, but other land uses as well, like agriculture and others. So when you start talking about that, and I think I resonate with what Arjun said, restoration is not planting trees, and everyone is in a race right now. UP did 1 crore plantation in 24 hours or whatever, something like this. Everyone wants to go there. But one system level change that I would really want to see or understand or even hear it from the partners is the acknowledgement of the fact, acknowledgement of landscape level interdependencies and interactions. So you can work in forest areas, but if you don't address it at a landscape level, the other land uses will impact and vice versa, right? So can we talk about that? And can we begin thinking, planning, implementing with that thought process in mind? I understand institutions were set up with their core expertise, as you also mentioned. But with the advent of effects of climate change, both and we need to do both mitigation and adaptation, these boundaries have blurred, and of the departments, I mean, now, and that's where the whole of government approach and where they should come together and implement, right? When we spoke to the partners in the state, we, of course, as I said, we realized they have the money, they have the intent, and they also somehow have the expertise to implement restoration from the classical restoration definition perspective, because of past experiences of restoration positive, which was, for example, the watershed development programs. But what we saw is that these processes need to adapt. They need to provide space for breaking these silos and allow resources to be flexibly and adaptively used for reaching the restoration outcomes. And capacity development, though at times I think it is a little overused, I would refrain from saying abused, but it is a little overused, but it also is an important trope, and we would need to do that at various levels, because still people think restoration is plantation, which it is not. And restoration doesn't mean converting every ecosystem out there into a tree-based ecosystem. Yeah, and the communities are at the heart of all of this, right? So when one important aspect is that how are we strengthening the communities and bringing about seeking their inputs on how and what is needed, right? So we had an excellent experience in Uttarakhand with the Van Panchayats, where we are working in about 30,000 hectares. Just for the information, there is about 11,217 Van Panchayats in Uttarakhand, addressing about 450,000 hectares in the state and catering to the needs of 26 lakh population, is spread across 11 districts. That's an excellent institution. Also because the legal mandate that it has for forest management. And can we work with them and see how the community can contribute to this entire restoration plan that we are developing? That's one. The other thing we also realized that can there be government level orders, SOPs, which allows departments to come together and work. Because every time we try to do a convergence kind of a thing, it becomes a conflict when implementation begins. That's not my job, and that's not in my purview. Agroforestry, for example, has been like this. Who owns it? The forest department doesn't want to own it, though they have a social forestry wing under which they do agroforestry. The agriculture department also doesn't own it fully, so who owns it? So can we come up with government orders or even mechanisms which help these actors to come together and work together with the community? So I'll stop there maybe.
Thank you. I think, thank you for fielding my questions to both of you. I mean, they're not the ones listed, so I appreciate that. But Prashant, that doesn't bode well for you, because you were talking about interoperability, and one of the things that interoperability does for the development sector is that it makes convergence possible. And I think talking about communities, talking about convergence, talking about systems that will change, shifts in funding, shifts in standards, how do you really build some sort of genuine community ownership when you're building these platforms? Maybe you could give us a couple of examples from the work that you've been doing.
Thanks. So I think building systems, building tech for community starts with firstly involving community in your intervention design. I think so we work with about 280 NGOs who use tech with us. Other than one initiative, in every single thing there is a disbelief about there is digital illiteracy, people will not be able to use. And when you probe into questions saying when you're designing an intervention, right? So is this a bottom-up beneficiary designed intervention? Is it something we believe we can figure it out and push it on the community? It's always the latter. So some of us go figure out what is the best model for setting up a low-cost oil mill in the village. And then suddenly we go and start promoting that model, as opposed to let that be emergent. So I think the fundamental issue is, and then what happens when you design it, you end up designing a process and a technology to support it where the NGO still is sitting in the center. And then we talk about sustainability and continuity, that what happens if the NGO goes, everything collapses. It's not because of financial viability the issue is there. Money comes. People are hardworking in India, everywhere in the world. The poor work the hardest. Paisa kahin se aa jayega? The issue is when we are designing the intervention, we are designing it right. The linchpin is the NGO field worker. And we very conveniently forget that the amount of effort we will need to help adoption in the community is actually the same amount of effort that we need to spend with the field worker adopting the solution. So it begins by treating the community member as a true user of tech and a true designer of that intervention with you. Everything else is 101. We know enough. We know how to do intervention design. We know how to build technology. There's no rocket science there. But who is actually sitting in our design process? Who is sitting in the center of it? And I understand, and like what Arjun said, that it's about long term. So it becomes difficult to tell to the donor that I will show you results. But that is where this whole, you got to stand together as a sector and say, boss, this is how it will work. You cannot expect to see results in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. When you're trying to undo, when we're doing some deep fundamental investment with the community, you have to be patient with it. And you speak that language collectively, it works. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think that's really well said. I think as a sector, we need to take a stand on what is possible and what is not. And I think that's what we want to do in the future as well. I'm not going to summarize, although what you said, I'm going to leave it at that, but I am going to open it up to the audience. We do have 3 minutes to ask a question. I see that Dr. Akriti's hand is up, and then Raghav, is that you? Great, okay. So let's get the mics. You'll have to be louder than that. I can barely hear you.
My question is sort of a follow-on from something you asked, Jaskiran, and I'm going to put Kundan and Min on the spot a little bit on this. Kundan you mentioned that working with schemes and working with government is a big part of it, and we all know that public finance will, in India for a long time, be the biggest funder of work on the ground. How do you think we can move them away from this idea of how success is measured for all the schemes? It's great to talk about leveraging, and we all try to do that on the ground. But end of the day, for a forest department, for an agriculture department, things begin and end at number of people reached, number of trees planted. And maybe for the forest official or the DFO or anybody on the ground, they can't really do anything about it because that's coming top down also with everything from mark, make paid, and all of those sort of things. How can we move that thinking away to be more long-term, more impact measurability, because that will always be our biggest source of funding. So either of you, whoever wants to.
I'll try. You've put me on a spot for sure. Okay, I think let's accept, as I said in the beginning, we need to be willing to, break a few of these long-standing dogmas, no? Like, okay, फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट का एक टारगेट था 5 लाख सैपलिंग्स इस साल प्लांट करने थे, उन्होंने 6 लाख किया एंड दे आर सेलिब्रेटिंग दैट. नोबडी आस्क्ड देम द क्वेश्चन, और जब पूछते हैं तो वो ये नहीं बताते कि 20% सर्वाइवल रेट था. And then next year they are again replanting in the same area and probably increasing the plantation target by another 1 lakh. Yeah, so effective area that goes under plantation, so that's a difficult thing, but I think the forest department, at least the officers that we've been talking to, they also know these inherent challenges, and it is a systemic problem. But what I also realized when we were developing restoration plans, it is extremely important that we sit together with them and design measures which finds a way into their annual plan of operations. So what happens every year, the government or the department comes up with an annual plan of operations, and we in the project are trying that the restoration plans which are being developed and measures which are being identified are not like, finds its way into the annual plan of operations so that it can be financed. Yeah. So we are trying to do that, but I think I don't have a straight answer as yet on this. I am just struggling as much as you are.
Thank you. This is aptly named Learning and Leading, so I suppose that's a learning for all of us. Raghav, the time's already up, but if you make it really quick, we can squeeze you in.
Thanks. Sorry, I'll try to make this quick. It wasn't quick in my head. But this is just flowing from a reflection from Arjun. I had also had an opportunity to visit Timbuktu. It's been a while now, 2017-18, and really great, the community conserved area. What was really interesting was I was in conservation back then. And I was visiting the area with some other conservationists. And so I'm sure you know about how, the wolves recovered there, the black bucks recovered, the Palacios eagles started nesting again. And it seemed great, but the conservationists I was with, a few of them were not convinced that this was conservation. They said, this is not conservation. There were no baseline studies, nothing was counted, nothing was measured. And whatever, so that was their critique of the whole thing. And then just in the context of the other conversations from Mr. Ameen about, this trust-based financing, and from Mr. Mehra about, data being owned by the community. So I'm just wondering whether, and we also have examples now of, philanthropies which are funding smaller organizations, smaller initiatives about being more flexible with their data monitoring, reporting requirements and things like that. So I'm wondering whether there are any internal kind of reflections sectorally about how much data is too much data, how much counting is too much counting, at what point does it become a chore, at what point does it just become its own economy? Just reflections would be, I'd be really interested because this is just churning in my head constantly. Thanks.
That's a really interesting question and something that we are grappling with as well. In the Alliance, there are multiple kind of projects. So Timbuktu is listed as from one of the partners. Kalpavali is listed from there. You have Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary, another project which again did not have a baseline as such, but they started with restoration as well. Right? And then you have another project which maybe Forest Way again is started doing restoration with no baseline. But does that really mean that restoration didn't happen is a question that I would ask back. In fact, one of the things that, one of the projects that the Alliance is working on is going back to these sites and trying to see, can we figure out, is there a way to kind of measure or understand from, the current present situation, is there a way for us to kind of measure what is the actual delta that happened and what would be the ways to kind of create this, what would be the framework that you can create to actually understand what kind of restoration would have happened in those situations. But given that, I would also add that I think one thing we have to also be careful about is restoration is not one, I won't say there's a prescribed way of doing exact restoration. I think people come at it from different points of view or different channels. If you think about Auroville, when they started out, they planted the whole place with this auriculatus, no? And that's not a native plant, that's not a native tree. But the way they went about it was that, okay, now that we've planted it and there's a biomass, let's start cutting it down and then replacing it with native biodiversity. Now, if you would have asked me this question when they'd not started cutting down this, I would say that, okay, that's probably not restoration, but their intent counted for that because that's how they kind of went towards it afterwards. So I think there has to be a mix, and I think we have to kind of respect the kind of intentions that people work with, and of course now we're trying this out, but we don't know what exactly as a result we'll get in trying to see how do you understand from the past whether this was restored or not. Yeah.
Thanks, Arjun. Thanks, Raghav, for your question. I'm going to invite Navajyoti Roy, our champion who works with us in Chhattisgarh, to please say thank you to the panel and also present your gifts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaskiran. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank everyone who contributed to the success of this panel discussion. Firstly, I would like to thank our moderator, Ms. Jaskiran, for guiding our discussion and ensuring that we hear diverse and meaningful perspectives. I would also like to express our gratitude to our panelists, Mr. Arjun Singh, Mr. Minhaj Ameen, Mr. Prashant Mehra, and Mr. Kundan Burnwal for their rich insights and helping us reflect on ongoing India's restoration efforts.